And we're back. The Homes Podcast, Episode 6. It's a podcast where two local realtors interview local professionals in the city of Schenectady and other parts of the cities. But without the, my name is Jeury. As you can see, this is my first time introducing the podcast, so a little bit nervous. But I'm Jeury. Alongside with me is
Dave Kellogg. And Jeury, that was a fine intro. We haven't practiced this before.
Really,
it's we didn't plan that. That was a pretty good ad lib.
Like it?
Yeah, I do. You're good at it.
Good.
And please introduce yourselves.
Nora?
Hi, my name's Nora Wallace. I'm the zoning officer with the City of Schenectady.
Maurice Brown III. I'm the homeownership coordinator with the City of Schenectady.
Cool. Who's the first and the second?
My father and my brother.
Ooh.
Yeah. My father's got a bit of an ego.
I did not know you could do brother for second and second son for third.
Well, actually, you can do whatever you want.
I guess that's
just
true.
What you put on your birth
Just
certificate. Yeah, my third is not assumed. It's actually
Okay.
part of my name.
I like it.
So
Okay.
it's like
Good.
whatever he wrote.
So you got to keep up the tradition.
It's weird though.
Or if you go with a junior, you could have Maurice Brown III, the second.
See, like it would be weird. Like that's just weird. Plus, like think about it like this. Like so, if my brother has a son,
Yeah.
and I have a son,
Oh no.
so like if I had a son first, then my son would be the fourth if we kept going. And if my brother had one, what is he gonna name him the fifth?
Yeah, you got to keep it in chronological order.
Yeah, no, see,
I
that
like
doesn't
it.
work.
So now
I
it's
like
a race. Now it's a
I
race.
used to joke with my dad. I used to say that I was gonna name all of my kids Brown the Third as their last name, because technically you put it as my last name. So I was like, yeah. So I'm gonna have a son named Marquise Brown the third, and they'll be like, oh, well, who's? Oh, so your dad's the second? I'm like, no, I'm actually the first.
Hang on. There's that show with 8 seasons. Everyone didn't like it. It's first of his name. Maurice Brown III, first of his name.
That sounds kind of cool. Actually, I like
Yeah.
That is different. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
that.
You gotta start a new
I'm
chain.
gonna change my Twitter handle now.
First of his name. Yeah.
So we're here today to learn more about the city and code laws, specifically with Nora Wallace, who's a code officer for the city of Schenectady.
Well, actually, Nora
is
so she's the zoning officer.
Yeah.
Zoning
So
officer.
there's only one of her.
Okay.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
One and only.
There we go.
One and only, Nora.
Clarification. But tell us a little bit about yourself prior to getting that position for the city. Who is Nora Wallace?
It's a pretty deep question.
This is a deep podcast.
So prior to being with the City of Schenectady, I was working in transportation logistics, but leading up to that, I went to SUNY Plattsburgh for environmental studies, and my concentration was in geospatial planning. So when I went into transportation logistics, it definitely was a beneficial and a really great experience, but working with the City of Schenectady has been a big opportunity because it's in the field that I went to school for, and that's pretty lucky, you know.
Mm-hmm.
How long have you been with the city now?
I would say probably like a year and 6 months.
Okay.
Oh wow. How do you like it so far?
It's been a great experience so far. I actually was just put into the planning and development department, and so it's been a great opportunity because for the first part of my experience with the city, I was with the buildings department and worked directly with the code enforcement officers. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds.
Wow.
She's upstairs now, so
Yeah.
you'll be ground floor around here.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been moving up. Good. There you go. Good for you.
Literally.
So I guess we're here today to learn more about zoning laws, and David is always buying property, so he's wanting to maybe.
Well, I did. I actually have something I'm going to hand to her. I'm going to go to City Hall, though. I'm not going to hand it to her
Okay.
outside of work. I'll chase you to City Hall for it. I also have to pay the application. But
Yeah,
I
please
went.
don't hand in applications on the street.
Yeah, this is for a 4 unit. So I want to have a deeper question. So I want to separate two different thought processes for today, Nora. I want to do the everyday kind of how zoning affects buyers and sellers in Schenectady. And then I want to talk at a later time, maybe it'll pop up today, but at a later time, why are zoning laws the way they are? And that's more, because I played a lot of SimCity. And I know if you have your industrial on one side and your commercial on the other, everyone's driving everywhere. Mm-hmm. And walkable neighborhoods need to have bodegas and little shops. So I want to get into that a little bit later or another time, because I think that's a whole discussion on its own. But I will be sending in please correct me, because I don't do a lot of stuff. I have it all digitized in DocuSign, but I don't do a lot of this as of yet. But I had printed an area variance for a 4-family home. We're buying with the intention of keeping it a 4-family home, but it's an R2 neighborhood. And I went in with an area variance because I printed the wrong page. And I'm told that's for something different. So I did a use variance. Mm-hmm. Can you give me a couple examples besides the one we talked about for 2 seconds before the show of when a use variance makes sense?
So with Cary Ave, was the property outside of the window of a legal non-conforming? Because you said it's a 4-unit?
So specifically, folks, we're talking about 1507 Cary Street. It's the first house on Cary off of Knott Street.
Okay.
And Knott Street is C1, I think, right? So it has a lot more flexibility, but being the first house off, we're in an R2 neighborhood.
Right.
And it is set up.
Just before you go further, so just for the audience, zoning, so when they're saying R2, that's residential district 2, which means that the highest allowable residential is 2 units in one building, right?
Yep. So exactly. So in the R2, which is the 2-family residential zoning district, it means that if you're looking at residential dwellings, you are allowed to have a 1-family residential and you are allowed to have a 2-family, but that's the cap.
You can always build down. So if it's an R2, you can if it's residential 2-family, you can still build a single family, and they're not beholden to that.
Correct.
But
Yep.
that's the cap, like a speed limit. That's
Yes.
like, hey, this is as fast as you can go. This is as many units as you can put in.
Mm-hmm.
So we're under contract for this house on Cary Street. It's historically set up as a 4-unit.
Mm-hmm.
I had to defend why economically it makes sense as a 4 and nothing else, which was kind of fun to do.
Mm-hmm.
I got to throw in an after repair value, an ARV, an ARV on a house. I did CMAs for competitive market analysis to kind of show what the after repair valuation would be between the two, and one doesn't cover the price of repairs, and the other one does.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, Jesus, things are expensive.
Yeah,
everything's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, so can you tell me when I would use a use variance for? Actually, no, I don't want to get to that in a little bit. So I'm going to send this in, and there's a bunch of questions. I did my very best on guessing it. We talked about a self-created hardship. I think that's the last question. Do you know that questionnaire pretty well? Can you?
So I would say that when it comes to the 2 big differences that I would say between the area variance and a use variance that's very important to note is that if you're going for an area variance, which is essentially when it comes to you're asking for an exception outside of, let's say, like setbacks or how much percentage X is going to cover on your property. When the Board of Zoning Appeals is looking at that, they don't have to look at all 5 requirements and say they have to meet all of them. They only have to meet a few, right? Now, with the use variance, it has a harder level of proof where they have to make sure that all 5 requirements are met. And that's a huge difference because I think that it ups the ante of the level of refinement that would go into your presentation and how you present it to the board, because they have to find all 5, in fact, is the way that it goes.
Okay.
And so that's why bringing it to the self-imposed hardship, that's very important. And with the way that you're going about it is great, because when you put a contingency clause, that's showing that you're saying, you know what, this is what's going on. I'm aware of the zoning rules and regulations. I'm trying to do this following the rules. This is the reason, because you said you had, financial costs, loss, and benefits with it, and those are the things that I would imagine that they would consider. But when it comes to the use variance, choosing the self-imposed hardship is one of the harder things to prove, and the way you're going about it seems to be a really positive way.
Yeah. So when Nora just said self-imposed, contingent, it's basically saying for those who don't work in real estate every day, it's saying I'm interested in buying this property if and only if, then the statement. So we're under contract to buy a 4-unit home. It's allowed to be a 2-family home if and only if we can get permission to keep it or renovate it back to a 4-unit. So we use a lot of quick words because we're familiar with it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good point.
And I would have forgotten had Maurice not said something and said, all right, well, let's talk about R2. And
Yep,
all right,
yeah.
So that puts us back on the path of, Thank you for
And
slowing
stop
down with
buying all the buildings in Schenectady. Leave some for us. Come on.
that. I am going hungry in Amsterdam and Gloversville.
Slow down.
I just got a seller financing deal in Gloversville, and my attorney's like, "Here's your addendum. Go fill it out." And he's like, "You know what to do." I'm like, "All right." It was awesome.
Look at you.
So
what's a seller financed?
perfect question. So my client has the ability to go to a bank and get funding. But instead of, tying everything into banks, the seller can say, "Hey, look, I'm willing to hold paper," meaning I'm willing to basically loan you the debt that I'm going to sell my house for. And there's going to be a couple things like amortization. So I'm willing to pay, let's say, $55,000 over a 10, like break it down for 10 years.
Yeah.
But I'm only going to hold that note for 3 years. So at the end of 3 years, balloon payment, meaning you pay me the rest.
Oh.
And, we got it for, I think I put 6% in, which is phenomenal. It also has great tax implications for the seller because they can claim the down payment, whatever is negotiated, plus the 3 years of income off that note with the interest as well. Mm-hmm. And then it comes out the end. So if you're trying to, pay less in taxes, seller financing it can be great for the seller as well. It's not just buyer only kind of benefit. But yeah, I mean, I'm having fun in the areas. As we all know, Schenectady is getting more expensive, right?
Yeah. I wanted to ask Nora a question. Going back to the requirements that the Board of Zoning is looking at, whether it's a use variance or an area variance, what are they? What are those requirements that have to pass?
Ooh, that's a tricky question.
Right. I love tricky questions.
I don't have the 5 requirements off the top of my head, but that's why I wanted to explain is that with the use variance and an area variance, if you were going to say, I want to build a 10-foot high fence, they only look at maybe, let's say, like 3 of those, and they could say, you know what, that seems reasonable, X, Y, and Z. But then when it comes to the use variance, and this is something I wanted to do a quick pivot on, is that some people that are watching might wonder, so if this house that you're purchasing on Carey Street was already a 4-unit, why does he have to go through all of the bells and whistles?
It's grandfathered.
That's a great
It's grandfathered. I get, it's grandfathered in. I'm like, I don't think that always counts. Can you break that down for me?
Yes. So when it comes to zoning districts in general, I find that I speak to members of the public that don't always understand. And the way that I explain it is a zoning district's like a school district. Wherever a property belongs to, that's where the students will go. Similar to a zoning district, where that property belongs, it's within a zoning district that says this is the allowable uses, this is not permitted, right? Then from there, with the R2, the 2-family residential, is that, let's say the 4-family that you purchased is not has not been vacant for more than a year, right? Because it's residential. That means you wouldn't have to do the variance process at all, because residential properties within 1 year, if they're non-conforming, keep their legal non-conforming status, which means that this property was here before 2008 and it's allowed to be here because it's a continuous use. Now, on the flip side, for commercial properties, for their legal non-conforming status, is they have 2 years. And after the 2 year, where if it's a discontinued use, they lose it, and then you would have to go back to the starting point or conform it to what that zoning district is, which is usually the case, is that usually instead of going straight for a variance, let's say if somebody didn't do the contingency, it has to be conformed back to what is permitted in that district.
Okay, so basically, if the rule is 2-family in that area that my house happens to be located, I can only have a 2-family normally. However, if a building that is a 3 or 4-family has existed before those rules came out, I'm allowed to keep using it as that. But the moment that it's been not used as that for a year is when you now need a variance.
Yes, yep.
Now, I'm a big board gamer, and I like rules.
Oh.
So I'm going to ask you some tricky ones, if I can, about this exact thing.
Okay.
Let's say on this 4-family in a 2-family zone, 3 units are vacant, but 1 is occupied. Does that, now you're at 25% capacity, and you're within your R2, 2-family residential, because you only have 1 unit occupied. Does the whole building stay? Okay,
yeah.
cool. Great. So let's say now I am 11 and a half months in vacant. Can I put all my friends and family in there, sign a 1-week lease? They never move in, but they have a lease. They've paid me. I have proof. $1 a week. What a good deal.
Right.
Does that keep it as a 4-family?
So
I'm being tricky here on purpose.
the city of Schenectady does not allow short-term rentals.
So no.
Okay. So what's a long-term rental?
So and the reason why is because right now we're still working on, because Airbnb, right? That's considered a short-term rental, but and I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the reason is that we haven't passed anything new within the city council for Airbnbs, and so those are considered short-term rentals. And the reason why that's a sticky area is kind of when it comes to fire safety. That's the way it was explained to me. So let's say if people are coming in and out and all this stuff, and a fire happens, you'd have to have a different specs of sprinkler systems, right?
Yeah. So it's almost similar to the difference between a hotel and it being your apartment.
Yes.
And there are more things you have to consider and more safety precautions that need to be in place on something whenever it is a transient property. So hotel rentals, as you know, you can stay in a hotel for 2 days, 1 day, or you could stay there a whole month. But because it can constantly be different people there, there are more things that you need to do as an owner to make sure that everyone who's ever staying there is always safe. Whereas if you are a tenant, you're assumed to be, and so the long-term, short-term, is something that a lot of people will try and play with words. But basically, if you're living in a particular unit for more than 30 days, at that point, you're considered to be living there, right?
Perfect.
So that's where it really comes down to, because you could be on a month-to-month lease, right? And you're assumed a month-to-month lease if you do not have an annual lease. So you're automatically month-to-month if you don't have any paperwork. If you do have a lease, then it's whatever your lease says.
Okay. I mean, then it comes down to, okay, $1 a month, and they're in there 2 months, but they never move in.
Doesn't matter how much it is. Yeah.
I'm just, this is.
Well, no,
this is
it's
why I
an
like
interesting
real
way
estate, too.
because
It is a
I got
good question though.
someone asked me something about this recently because they said that it wasn't an apartment unit. They weren't renting it out because my cousin lives there.
I see.
Right? If you're not the one living there, it's a rental unit. It doesn't matter if you're getting money or not.
Yep.
So whether it's your cousin, sister, nephew, whoever, you're literally not the person living there, and that's what defines you as now being a rental unit at that point, because the exchange of cash is irrelevant in that situation. But it was a really interesting conversation because the person tried to argue down. I was like, listen, at the end of the day, the rule's the rule, and I'm not going back and forth. I said, are you living there? And that's what's going to determine if it's occupied by the owner or if it is a rental unit, because it's either occupied by the owner, a rental unit, or it's vacant. Those are the only 3 things that are happening.
If it has to fit in one of those 3, it's pretty easy to define.
Yeah.
I see. Because
Now-
my next, I'm sorry.
No, keep
My
going.
next question was what? God, Jerry, Jesus.
What?
My next, yeah, dude.
Maybe
My-
HR.
Yeah.
Don't tell them.
Yeah, let's call HR.
So the next question then is in-law apartments. I've had so many people ask this because everyone's like, well, I've got an in-law apartment. How do I make it a 2? Or if it's a 2-family, how do I make it an in-law apartment? Because they maybe down payment requirements on a purchase could be different. And I don't know if you want to tackle that, or we can just hit the pass button on that for today. But there's a lot of things that clients with the dream that are really chasing it. Like I love a client that says, let's get creative and figure out how to do this. And I will change what I have to change, either in the verbiage or how I fund it or whatever. Their dream is to get a house or an investment property, and I want to know the rules so I can best guide them through and avoid some pitfalls.
Right. No, that's a very good question, because there's a couple of angles that we could go with. So first of all is, depending on the zoning district, you might be able to create the in-law, suite without having a variance included. But then here's the other thing is, because as we know, life and as people get older, tragedy happens, and we need to take care of our parents. So there is a provision within the zoning ordinance. Let's say somebody's parents are no longer able to take care of themselves. There is a accessory family care unit that you can put on your property, and it requires a special use permit. But it's specifically in the zoning ordinance for when somebody may need to take care of a family member that can no longer take care of themselves. So that's a part 2 to the question that you have. And then part 3 is that sometimes it's not allowed, because if you're in a single family and you're creating a 2-family dwelling, that isn't permitted.
Might be
So
tricky.
Yeah.
yeah.
Super interesting. Okay, thank you. That was
Actually, yeah, I had a question on that. Since you spoke on permits, I guess, what's the process of obtaining permits when you're trying to buy a property and trying to maybe conform it to different zoning?
So do you have an idea of like a use that you are envisioning?
Not really. I mean, the special use permits. What's the process in regards to getting those?
So with special use permits, it goes to the Planning Commission, and part of the reason for that is because, how do they put it? It's not to have an adverse effect on the neighborhood is a part of it. So it's in consideration to see if it has a giant impact, or if it's, really nothing. This is just an extra space that's going to be for my in-laws who can't take care of themselves. That's a different type of thing. But there's all sorts of different uses that have special use permits, but it would depend on the zoning district.
Okay.
And then with that involved, if you were opening up a new business per se, right, and it's a permitted use, you would have to either go through a site plan review, a change in tenancy, or a change in tenancy waiver. And one of the things that is stipulated is that prior to obtaining building permits to do work on the interior or exterior of the commercial space, you have to get the Planning Commission's approval before doing that. Now, on the other hand, if we're talking residential, as long as you are not exceeding 3 to 5 units in an apartment, you can obtain the building permits via the Schenectady website, because we have an online platform. Even on the business cards, if you go to the buildings department, we actually have this very cool QR code that, let's say you're a contractor and you're on the road and you're doing fences for somebody, you could do the little QR code and then bing, you're right there, and you can start filling out the information.
Okay.
That's cool.
That is pretty cool.
That's a nice update.
Yeah.
I always tell people, when in doubt, just call.
That's all I do.
Yeah, you kind of have to. And the thing is, when people own something, often they think it's theirs, so why do I need your permission for it? The reason you need permission is because there's already been a rule set, right? That's the end all be all to it. But those rules exist usually for safety reasons, to also protect the interest of the community as a whole. Ultimately, that's how they're creating the rules, as the reason that they were done at the time that they were done. Now, over time, of course, things in the community and the needs of the community and what our residents may want from their community may change, right? So the time to be able to have those things change over is really always dictated based on our community and them actually reaching out, or if there's a constant thing that we're dealing with in the community, that's when the new changes occur, or our council or someone else like that starts advocating for a change, because it will benefit the community. And then there's a process to get through all of that. There's a lot of research, a lot of things that have to go down in order for that to occur. But ultimately, there are already rules, no matter which city or township that you live in, that are preset. Who knows when they were done, because there's no requirement that they get updated but so often, right? So you're living in a community, it has rules for it, and unfortunately, no one knows which rules will apply to you necessarily if we don't know what you want to do. So I recommend that all people, call up the building inspector, a code enforcement officer. You can talk to our zoning officer, come in if you want to set up a time where you can get a real sit-down conversation, and tell them, like, hey, I'm thinking about doing these things, right? You don't have to commit. So I'm thinking about doing these things.
I'm considering the process of starting this process.
So do I need permits for these? And it's yes, you do, or no, you don't for it, right?
Sure.
I mean, you don't need a permit to paint the inside of your house.
Yeah.
But if you're doing major interior work to your house, that's classified as a rehabilitation or renovation, and it could. So it's just easier to just ask. Even putting up a fence, you need a permit for that too.
Wow.
So
I guess that goes to my next questions. What penalties do you incur without doing things with a permit or things like that?
So, when it comes to building without permits, the code enforcement officers can tag, depending on the scope of the project and what's going on, and they catch without the permits, they can do a stop work order, which is a $550
think so.
fine. Yeah, which is a flat out $550, and then it's $50 a day as if it's an outstanding violation. For my zoning process and violations, I don't do stop work orders with it. It's not a provision within the zoning ordinance. But again, it is $50 a day, which is why we try to, honestly, I think that it's important to not take an adversarial approach when working with the public, and I actively make a point not to do that. I'm always trying to work with the public, because it's like, the point of the enforcement is just to make sure that the things that Maurice was discussing are going smoothly and people are following the rules. But let's say you had no idea and a contractor said, yeah, I got the permits, because this happens a lot. Oh yeah, the fence is no problem. I went to the buildings department. I got the permits, no problem. And then all of a sudden you're like, why is Nora at my door? And it's because he didn't. And so those are the kind of situations where, unfortunately, you really got to be careful with the contractors and make sure that they're really pulling the permits, because at the end of the day, let's say he did that without a permit, it's the homeowner that has to pay the fees. And sometimes I think that people get confused with that and frustrated, reasonably. But for the most part, we're just looking to work with everybody to get to a solution so that by the end of the 30 days, you're not owing a ton of money.
Yeah.
If you're getting any kind of service done in any industry, you always want your receipts, right, when you buy something. And if someone is going to get a permit for you for your house, you want to see the permit.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I was just about to ask that.
You trust but verify.
Exactly.
I don't remember who told me that, but I've heard it a lot. So.
Trust and verify. Maybe Nora
Trust
did.
but
Because she'll be knocking on your door if you didn't.
So Nora, there's a lot of people that are moving to the area that are looking to start some sort of business, and because you are the department, can you tell me what most people for people looking for use variances are putting in R1 zones? Like if you have a house and someone bought a house and say, look, I want a daycare, or I want a massage parlor, or I want a bar. Mm-hmm. Clearly, bars don't usually go in R1s. Right, and what are the common businesses that you see get approved for R2 neighborhoods or zoning areas?
I don't know if we could say that. That's a little harder of a question, but I think what probably makes more sense for you in this situation is what is allowed there or not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
right.
That's a good way to
So
look at it.
if you look at what's called the Schedule A for residential zone districts, so R1, R2, R3, and I don't know what the other 3 or 4 in there are, but it tells you if it's not permitted outright, it tells you if it's permitted, and it tells you if you need a special use permit, as long as it's already been defined in the code.
So a special use permit would be like if I wanted to buy a 2-family in a residential 2 zone area, I would use a use permit to put a daycare on the first floor.
That would be a tough sell. So when it comes to so with the R1, it's the most restrictive, because basically when you look at zoning, it's to keep conforming uses together, right? And it's a way to streamline compatible areas. And so if you think about it from a planning perspective, and you think about, let's say, walkable streets and different things like that, and enjoying the community that you live in, it would be nice if it flowed in a way and things were right, where if you're going to an R1, single family residentials, they're there and everything because that's what's permitted. And then if you go to a commercial district, you have more commercial opportunities, So it's kind of a way to keep compatible uses together. But then in the case of legal nonconforming, and we want to talk about cultural heritage, that's part of it. Is so the zoning isn't to make people conform in a very tyrant way. That's why there's different provisions for the variances, but I gotta reiterate that the R1 is very restrictive, so there's not many uses that are permitted besides single family. But then on the other hand, R2, you can have more expertise professions like a dentist office, a lawyer, real estate, but those go with the special use permits. So it's designed in a way for more compatible uses that are next to each other. But then when you think of cultural heritage, and let's say there's a, mom and pop bar that's always been in the R1, well, if it was never discontinued, then the next person, once you retire, that buys it can keep that legacy going. Yeah. So it leaves room for opportunity.
As long as it's been out of operation for no more than 2 years.
Correct.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
So like a big thing for it you got to think about is a lot of those rules are because of the assumed impact of a particular type of business.
That's well put.
Right? So if you have a restaurant, there's a certain amount of clients you're expecting to come in, which means a certain amount of parking. So why would you put a restaurant in the middle of a residential neighborhood that everybody doesn't have a driveway? Now you're negatively impacting the neighborhood. So you got to keep in mind cities were designed at some point. And they may have made alterations to design, but they are, like, if you just go around Schenectady and you look, you'll notice there are certain areas that are corridors where most of the businesses are kind of like pushed together there. So State Street, parts of Union, parts of Albany Street, Van Vranken. Yep. These are all commercial corridors, quote unquote, right? So, and then you have your downtown district as well. So at some point it was designed that certain business types they wanted to keep in certain areas. And when there's a new type of business that comes out that no one perceived before, now a new rule has to get made. And when there isn't a rule already hard and fast there, then you need to try and get permission to get it. That's a variance of some sort, right? And if there's a situation where you feel like that use of that business will benefit your neighborhood, or it works well in that residential or place where, maybe the rule just outlines that it shouldn't be, now you got to prove that. And so therefore there's a bunch of questions. It's an application process. We usually recommend, if you do have a professional who is experienced with that, if they help you along with those things. We'll answer basic questions for you, but we can't really do the presentation for you or outline everything because we're not you and we don't really know what all your intent is. So, when possible, hire a professional to help you through it if you don't already have that experience. But Google is my best friend.
Yeah.
Like, so if you Google Schenectady zoning, it'll take you to our website, or just go to cityofschenectady.com. And you can search and play around all day if you want to on there. You can get a copy of the Schedule A, which is for the residential uses, a copy of the Schedule B for the commercial zone districts in those uses. And if you're building something brand new and there's not anything on that lot, you can get the Schedule C, which is the lot development standards as well.
I didn't know about that one.
Oh, yeah. Oh. It's A, B, and C.
I understand.
I'm sure there are other letters.
I understand that the letters keep moving forward. But I didn't know about the lot development. I'm going to have to grab that. All right, cool.
Yeah, and we do have those things available as resources. We print them out all the time. I know, trees dying, whatnot. But the reality of it is a lot of our population still likes to have the physical paper document. So you can do a lot of the applications online for those of us who are tech savvy. If you're going to need help with that, set an appointment with somebody here at the city. That's what we're for. We are civil servants first. But the physical paper documents are often available if you come into our offices. So in the Department of Development, it's on the second floor, room 206. So if you come up there, we have a wall filled with a lot of the commonly asked for documents already printed for you.
Nice.
Cool.
So, are you going to say something?
No,
okay.
I did. I said cool.
That was a lot of info, but that's necessary because a lot of people don't know where to navigate or where to find certain things. So I appreciate you.
Tell people all the time, like, if it's house related and you're a homeowner at all,
call Maurice.
No, don't call
Maurice. Go visit Maurice.
Visit Maurice.
Send me an email. No, but I don't mind setting aside time for you.
Right.
All of your questions. And if I don't know the answer, and I don't know everything, so a lot of times I'm like, I don't know. I was like, but I can help you find out.
Yeah.
Or let's figure out who's the person you do need to talk to for that.
Correct.
My position is specifically has a lot of different things tied into it, but one of the major things is simply guidance for our community members who are homeowners seeking home ownership or you're a home buyer, in order to try and provide you some type of guidance and get you to who you need to talk to, whether it's resources, information. I refer people to Nora all the time. I like email because, I like to have, CYA,
Yeah.
track record of the community.
Trackability.
Well, it's
Yeah,
about
it is.
accountability too. I think as professionals, we should be able to be held accountable also to what we have said and be able to make sure that what we said was the right thing.
Yeah.
You know, because if it's a he said, she said conversation, I'm going to believe me over you. So, but it doesn't mean I didn't forget.
Yeah.
I could have forgotten something. I don't know, you know? So, but I tell people all the time, like, hey, I'll put something in my calendar. I'll block out that time for you. I usually do an hour by default for you. And you can ask me 50 million questions all you want to. And I tell people all the time, even if it's a dumb question, ask it anyway. Just ask it anyway. People have to be really comfortable with just asking dumb questions so that you understand and feel good about the information.
I'm sure it's the same with Jeury as it is with myself. But most of what I do is I lay out when we have new clients. You know, it's what's the path forward, and we lay out the steps. I don't walk into a house and say this is a stove that makes this the kitchen. There's a toilet in this room that makes it the bathroom. You know, it's hey, let's talk about this, and what's your opinion on this, and if I want to buy this, how do I move forward? And you know, it's more of an education process ever than sales. Like, the house will sell itself, in my opinion. I don't go in there and
that's
like,
what I always
I don't go in there and be like, imagine the Christmas tree or here, or imagine the couch there, and watching the big football game, which happens every year on the big TV.
That you don't watch.
I don't watch it. It's like this is where you can. I'm not trying to sell feelings. I mean, people have the desire to buy already. Otherwise, we wouldn't be going out.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm there to educate and guide. That's it. And that's why. So I love these personally, because for me, this is personal growth. You know, every time I have a conversation, I learn more and I can give more. And I don't remember 100%, which is why we're all recorded, right? So you can watch it over and over. And it's also really fun.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I had a question. I was thinking, when you said about developing a city, I've always had this question. What goes into that? Like, is there like, I guess, an amount of certain businesses, churches, schools that has to go into a city if we started brand new?
I am not a planner.
I would say, honestly, I think that it's the community, because without a community, you don't have a city. Without the people, what is it? Just, there's nothing there, right?
Yeah.
So I would say that one of the things that would be the first step that I think is very important is community engagement, talking to neighborhood community groups, working with them, because if you stay in the top-down looking, you're going to miss all of the important things and the actual needs of the community members. If you're going out into the community, if you're doing what we all do, is making connections with people, trying to guide them through things that aren't common sense. These are things that have to be, I learn from, real estate agents all the time, from Maurice. It's like a, back and forth.
It's a two-way street.
Exactly,
that information.
That it just takes the people, because it's what the people really want, that makes the planning effective.
Yeah, Nora for president. I think that sold it there.
That's actually a really good thing that I guess I should mention that it segues into. So to create a city from scratch, it's a whole complicated process to some degree. There's certain legal things, because your cities have to abide by your county's rules, your county has to abide by your state's rules, and so on, right? And the needs of the community are what outline why they make decisions that they make when it comes to the design. That also is how they make the decisions for where they want to spend money. And the city of Schenectady, like many of the other communities in a capital district, sometimes receives federal funds based on our populations in order to be used for the benefit of our greater community, especially for those who are low to moderate income in a lot of situations, or different improvements that are overall to benefit the city. So when we get those monies in almost every year, we actually have to submit a plan for it, right? And then we also do periodically do an overall plan for the vision of the city for the next couple of years and how we're spending money in the next couple of years. So we actually have an annual action plan that goes out every year. There's always a public hearing associated with it, and unfortunately, there's usually only like a handful of people going there.
Look at that. Yeah.
Public engagement can be incredibly low on very important things. It's really a
it
shame.
is.
Yeah, a shame.
In my experience, most people complain at the wrong time. You complain after the fact, as opposed to making sure that your needs are voiced earlier on, so it's taken into consideration, right? So, because if someone's already physically like building a house, you don't want them to be almost finished and then be like, oh, hey, actually, can you move that kitchen to the other floor? Like, that's not the time to say that, right? But sometimes it takes that for you to realize, like, hey, you know what? Maybe I need to be engaged a little bit more. Go to your city council meetings. You can go to the planning commission meetings. Those are open to the public. You can go to the Board of Zoning Approvals?
Appeals.
Board of Zoning Appeals. You can go to those meetings. You can find out what's going on in your city. And then when we have things like our public hearings that come out, go there and make sure you participate, voice your opinion, so that that's always recorded and taken into consideration. Because maybe one person saying one thing doesn't move a needle, but if enough people are saying it, it has to be considered. Now we got to look into it as options. So we do have a public hearing going on for the 2024-2025 annual action plan and the 2025 to 2029 consolidated plan. So the consolidated plan is essentially like a 5-year plan of how we're intending to spend our federal funds in the needs of our community, right? And then the annual action plan is each year how we're going to get to those goals that were laid out in that 5-year plan.
Cool. So now's the time.
Yes.
Really, now is the time to start. Don't shout the wall. The door is open.
Yes.
Go in that door, and instead of shouting, let's have conversations at the right time.
Yeah, there's actually a public hearing. It'll be held on February 27th, and it'll be in room 209 at City Hall from 5 p.m. to 6:30. So any of our community members, whether you live, work, worship in this area or play, whatever it is, I always say you are a member of our community because you engage with our community. If you serve the people in our community, if you live in our community, you are part of it. Right?
Yeah.
So live, work, worship, play, all come into that public hearing, and definitely, listen to the information that's being presented, and also be comfortable providing your opinions as well, because maybe there's somebody else who's just not comfortable giving the opinion that is the same as yours, and therefore they don't feel heard, and you're that voice for them.
I'm going to be there. Because
we should go.
Well, I'm gonna. You know how some people are like all about bike trails and some people are all about trees. If you're on Van Vranken right now, there's a piece of road missing, and you can see the original trolley lines. I'm gonna be the trolley guy. I want trolleys back in.
I mean,
honestly, there's a really interesting history with the
could be that
trolleys.
guy.
And great pictures on the whatever city now and then. And there's one all about trolleys in the capital region. And
let's bring them back.
I want
2024.
I want them.
If anything, you might become a social media sensation.
There you go.
The trolley guy.
I know you want trolleys and ice cream shops.
Yep.
Right?
I want
He wants
anything
local
that
ice cream shops in walking distance.
On another day, I want to talk to you again, Nora, another time about walkable neighborhoods and spot zoning and putting in, the mom and shop stops, and I understand there's a lot of impact clearly, but if I want almost anything, I have to get in the car.
Oh, well, it's interesting. So, okay, listen, I'm really all for trolleys, but like I said, it has a really interesting history because during the Eisenhower period after World War II, the trolley system from that period was systematically taken out of the East Coast and the West Coast and taken over by GM. I swear to God, this is a real thing. There was a Supreme Court case about it, right? And that's why when you look at certain neighborhoods that have houses that are like this, that are like right next to each other, you can kind of get an idea of how old that neighborhood is because if you look at a trolley line and you look at where you would stop, that's how the houses were set up. You'd come out of your house, the trolley would be there, and then that would be the public transport. But then it got replaced by first the buses because the whole like history with this was that make something that's public transport a little less appealing, right? Like if you're on a trolley, you're like, oh, like I feel like so metropolitan. This is kind of cool, right?
Spaces are big. You can stand. You can sit.
Right, more comfortable. But then when you're on the bus, you're like, oh, there's like diesel fumes. There's different things. You're like a little bit, right? It's a little less comfortable. But what about the automobile?
I think we're gonna make this happen.
Right.
I think we're gonna bring
So the trolleys were assassinated by the automobile
They
industry.
were during the Eisenhower period systematically
I didn't
because
even know that.
it was partially war funding for if there was a time of crisis. That's what part of the idea for the highways. And then the number two thing is that with the automobile, we were sold on the idea of the American dream. And I'm not talking anything negatively about the automobile, but think about it. You're in control. You're behind the wheel. You make it sexy. You make it fun. And you're like, to hell with the bus. I'm getting a car. It's affordable. Why not?
Cars freedom.
Then, but how far is your commute to your daily work? What does that look like? Because on average, it's like 30 to 40 minutes for the average American.
Only because it's able to be so. If you were on a bike, you wouldn't work 30 miles away. We'd have much more people
No,
being
that's
local.
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
But think about how much time you're spending in your car.
So
You know?
I 100%.
Especially us.
5.5
I live in my car.
So I did construction previously, and I would drive an hour and see the same construction guy driving from where I'm going to
Yeah.
work next to me. So we're both driving an hour
Wow.
to each other's neighborhoods to do jobs because they're bid by other companies, and then we pass each other on the way back. Right? So why couldn't I work in my neighborhood? Same work, right? If I'm twisting a light bulb, if I'm mopping the floor, if I'm building a house, because we all have cars.
Right.
Now you've watched Who Killed the Electric Car, I can tell.
Oh, I don't.
Have you seen that documentary?
No.
Oh my God, that talks about
Oh.
exactly a lot of what you just talked
Oh,
about.
no kidding. Okay, I'll have to
Absolutely,
check it out.
it's great.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a documentary guy, but you guys make it seem like it might be something I.
So in
I did not know this.
I know, I'm learning a lot right now.
So
I didn't know any of this.
in a previous part of my life, I'm a cancer survivor. It comes up time and time
wow.
again. Everyone talks about No Shave November. I'll do it live, kind of. I'm a testicular cancer survivor.
Wow.
Right, so don't worry about the beard. I'll put it on our 6 viewers can pay attention to us. When I was sick, when I was on chemo, I watched every documentary on Netflix, and that was one of them. And that's like the one I really remember. I was like,
yeah.
oh my God, this is incredible. And I don't know if it's still on there, but there was a couple of local ones. There was Farmageddon that takes place in Worcester.
Really?
Yeah, there's a lot of filmography in our area. They don't all become blockbusters, but there's a lot that happen locally.
I'll have to check that out. I'm a huge documentary nerd. Not
Yeah.
gonna lie.
It's what got me through because you can only
Yeah.
watch the same show 12 times.
Mm-hmm.
So
So
Yeah.
we definitely got to write a list of documentaries for you.
Yeah.
We need it. Recommendations.
there's I mean, when you're watching something and they're talking about stuff I've driven by 100 times, and I've driven by Worcester 100 times. I've driven by the Farm Bureau on what is it? It's not Route 9, is it? It's like North Pearl Street goes up to Menands through Menands. There's that big Farm Bureau building there.
Yeah, I've driven. Yep, I know what you're talking
Stay in
about.
Schenectady.
I'm just gonna say, yeah, I know.
I'm
but I
watching
don't.
the screen. I'm like, I drive by that. I know that.
Oh, no way.
That's really cool.
Oh, wow.
So I know we are winding down, but I just wanted to make sure to give Nora opportunity to just say what is a zoning officer, and what are the ways that you can help if anybody does need you, and how they would contact you.
Okay, so I'll do the 3 bigs. Is that if you are considering any kind of use, new use, or you're going into a commercial space and it's a new use, call me to see if it's permitted. We do have online a zoning map that you can look up addresses so you can have a better idea beforehand. But I love talking to people about their ideas for businesses or what they want to do. And then even if the zoning district doesn't work, we'll look for another location and then we'll see what we can do, right? And then another thing that I do is I review the permits for fences, surface improvement, extensions, signage. Signage needs permits as well. So you can't just put signs up on buildings. There's very specific. And then I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but those are the big ones. Is so fences, extensions, new structures, so accessory structures, and did I say driveways?
Oh, you didn't.
Not yet.
Driveways.
driveways.
So
All right.
driveways. And then I also do zoning compliance letters. So let's say if somebody's trying to refinance, or let's say you need a letter that states, this is the use I want to do. Yes, it's permitted. And are there zoning violations? It'll include all of that.
I'm getting those more and more where there's being requested zoning
Okay.
compliance.
So you can hit me up. We have, so they're a $40 fee, but you can hit me up and we can get them rolling.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Yeah, thank
Perfect.
you, Nora. And is it people can set appointments or call you, or they can just come into Department of Development as well.
Yeah.
In room 206.
What's your preferred? So you can, if someone wanted to like etch out a whole hour of your time or a half hour or 10 minutes, like what's the best contact method that would work for you? Just put someone on the schedule.
So if it's an hour, I would prefer an appointment to be scheduled. But honestly, I'm pretty flexible because, like, you know, we're public servants. So if I'm not out in the field or in a meeting, you can call me by phone. You can stop in the office. I try to make myself as available as possible.
Cool.
Perfect. Well, Nora, thank you for your time. This was very informative. I learned a lot today.
Oh.
Yeah,
I didn't know a lot of.
Yeah.
Oh, and if there's anyone in our audience who has specific questions or anything else, you can definitely, or any other ideas of people you'd like to see, even from City Hall, that to come in here and talk a little bit, definitely put it in the chat as well.
Yeah. That's a request line, just not live. Tell us what you want to know or who you want to talk to.
Exactly. I think you should be a permanent host nowadays.
You know,
I think you just sold yourself. You're staying right there.
we'll see if I can't run fast enough.
Well, once again, thank you, Nora. Any
you for
last
having
words,
No,
David?
it was as always a great pleasure to be here. So I mean, it does just happen that what Maurice talked about happens to be 2 weeks from today, which is our next podcast.
Oh.
And so we can see each other in the morning and maybe go talk about how great trolleys would be to a research of mass transit and trolleys that evening. That's the 27th at 5 o'clock. What's the location on that?
It's at City Hall, 105 J Street. Come in through the Franklin Street entrance. Don't try to walk up the stairs. It's not going to work out. And it will be in room 209.
209. Perfect.
Perfect. Awesome.
All right. Thank you guys.
That's all from us today. Peace.